Hello and welcome to the Week 9 Waiver Wire Show. Today, we'll be discussing the top waiver wire pickups at each position, including both shallow and deeper league targets. Be sure you stay tuned to the end where we answer listener questions from Twitter. This is a really weak week on the wire. I think hopefully most people who listen to this, Trey McBride is already owned on your roster. If we've been talking about Trey McBride for the last couple of weeks, role was already growing. Then Zach Ertz got hurt and the trade deadline was approaching. I think if you were paying attention, hopefully you already had Trey McBride on your team. However, I understand that a lot of people don't have room to carry two tight ends, and we see 20% owned Trey McBride on Yahoo, 8% on ESPN. Is Trey McBride a priority this week, Sam? And how big of a priority do you think Trey McBride is?
Yeah, so I have Trey McBride ranked as my top waiver wire ad of the week. And certainly amongst tight ends that are widely available, he is by far the best ad. So last week, McBride had a ridiculous game. He had 14 targets. And per JJ Zacharyson, that was the highest target share any tight end has had in a game this entire season. So just a massive, massive target share for McBride. He also ran nearly 90% of the routes in Arizona, which is an extremely high mark for a tight end. We only see guys like Travis Kelce, Dallas Goedert get up to that high of a route rate. So he's a full-time tight end in an offense that really lacks pass catching talent outside of Marquise Brown. With Kyler Murray returning likely in week 10, I think there's a real case for Trey McBride to have top 6 tight end upside down the stretch. I'm not saying I'd project it as that or that's a guarantee, but after your guys like Kelce, Goddard, Hawkinson, Andrews, Kittle, etc., I think McBride is right there in the next tier after those guys. So if I'm on a team that doesn't have one of those elite options, I'm getting pretty aggressive off the waiver wire for McBride. I think, up to 25, 30% of your FAAB budget, if you're still looking for a tight end, is justified. And yeah, know your league mates as well. If you think it's going to take more than that and you really are desperate at tight end, I would not kill you for going more than that. I really do think McBride has pretty good upside off the wire this week.
So the knock on McBride would be a lot of his production in this game came in garbage time, like a ton of it. The tape bros say, well, he only really ran one route. They just kept giving it to him because it was garbage time. I think that McBride's former Mackey Award winner talent and the way this team plays, everybody knows Zach Ertz is dust. Look at how many targets Zach Ertz was getting at the end of last year. Look how many targets Zach Ertz was getting at the beginning of this year. It just, when you play the way they play and have the personnel they have, it funnels targets to the tight end position. So I feel good about McBride. I think I would not say that, for me at least, he separates from someone like David Njoku. David Njoku's role is also awesome. His competition for targets is much tougher, but I kind of think Njoku's a better player, period. I do think Kyler coming back makes a good difference and a positive one for McBride. But yeah, what would you think about that, Sam? If you had Njoku, would you still be trying to add McBride?
I would be trying to add McBride. I probably wouldn't be blowing all of my FAAB to make that swap. But if I could, just add McBride for free and cut Njoku, I think I would do it. Njoku's ADOT has just been so low this year. And at this point, I feel more confident in Kyler returning and providing positive quarterback play than I do about Deshaun Watson and PJ Walker being good quarterbacks in Cleveland. So yeah, that's where I stand on that. But yeah, I agree with you that maybe not a different tier for those two players, but I do prefer McBride.
Okay. While we're here, we are going to get to listener questions later in the show, but while we're on this subject, I have another one for you here. Yader Vargas says, better pick up rest of season, McBride or Kincaid. Thank you, ETR. Well, thank you, Yader, for being a audience member. Kincaid had a mini breakout. Of course, it came with Dawson Knox not in that game, but Kincaid certainly looked good in that Island game in week 8. What do you think rest of season, Sam, McBride or Kincaid?
Yeah, I think I would side with Kincaid here just for the offensive environment. His role in week 8 obviously was much better with Dawson Knox out. I think there's still, here's the thing with Kincaid. I don't think Knox is done for the year. And I think when Knox returns, Kincaid's role is going to scale down. And while he did have a good performance in week 8, he was only at like an 18% target share, which is certainly good for a tight end, but this is still an offense that's really going to funnel through Stephon Diggs. I still think Gabe Davis is going to have a role. Some of these other guys like Shakir, James Cook are going to have roles. So I think Kincaid's role is going to be smaller in Buffalo than McBride's is in Arizona, but the Bills are just going to score more touchdowns than the Cardinals. So I think I would take Kincaid over McBride, but I think it's relatively close there.
Okay, fair. Let's move on from this McBride stuff for a second. We'll circle back when we get to more listener questions. I want to talk about Demario Douglas. Pop Douglas somehow is only 3% owned on Yahoo, 1% on ESPN. Pop Douglas has been impressive. Round 6 rookie, very undersized, but has been impressive when he's been able to play. Now, my gosh, I mean, Kendrick Bourne tore his ACL. He's out for the year. Devontae Parker has a concussion. They effectively benched Juju Smith-Schuster this past week. Demario Douglas is, I think, pretty clearly ahead of him. And so I have not been like doing anything with Patriots players all year. I barely played them in DFS. I don't think I've really played them at all. I don't think I have any on any of my season-long teams. Should I be making an exception here for Demario Douglas here, Sam, the slot receiver for the Patriots?
Yeah, I think that there's at least a chance that Demario Douglas can do what Kendrick Bourne was doing this season, which was basically giving you wide receiver 3 level production and popping up for a couple big games of 10, 11, 12 targets. You know, I think as talents, there's at least a chance that Demario Douglas, a rookie, can sort of take that Kendrick Bourne role in New England, which we've seen, you know, be relatively fantasy viable. So yeah, I think you should make an exception for Douglas. I think especially if you're in PPR leagues, I think Douglas is going to be much more valuable in that compared to half PPR and standard, because he is sort of a, you know, slot player, lower ADOT. I think his relevant fantasy performances are going to be more along the lines of, you know, 8 catches for 60 yards and a touchdown, something like that. So, you know, in a weak waiver wire week, I do think Douglas is the best add, but I'm not going overboard adding him. You know, I think 10%-ish, 15%-ish of your FAAB is sort of the right range for him.
Okay, agreed. Will Levis came on and lit the world on fire. 4 touchdowns, no interceptions for Will Levis in his first career start. He's already been named the starter here for week 9. Will Levis is a guy that a lot of draft Twitter hated, and the NFL didn't like him that much either, considering he fell to the second round. I mean, when a quarterback falls to the second round, it means the NFL does not like you that much. Will Levis, though, man, these quarterbacks that are talented that everyone hates because of XYZ reason, you know, Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, maybe Will Levis is next on that line. Dude certainly has the physical tools. I don't know that I'd be adding Will Levis in a 1 quarterback league, Sam, but I could be off there. What do you think about Will Levis and what kind of leagues you'd be adding him in?
Yeah. Well, first off, you know, before we talk about Levis and waivers and in fantasy, how the hell was Malik Willis above Will Levis on the depth chart for so many weeks? Like that makes zero sense to me. I don't know if you have any takes on that, Adam, but
incumbent. He was the incumbent. That's all.
Yeah, but anyways, that is wild. Clearly, he must be a better in-game performer than a practice player. But anyways, on Levis, off the wire this week, I agree with you, Adam. Like for most teams, I'm not rushing to get Levis off the wire, but think of sort of how the low-end quarterback 1s, high-end quarterback 2s have just been wiped off the map this year in fantasy. You got Aaron Rodgers, Achilles tear, done. Kirk Cousins, Achilles tear, done. Daniel Jones, banged up and bad. Anthony Richardson, you know, on IR. Like that whole range of low-end QB1s and quarterback 2s is just gone. It's not giving you anything. So I think there are fantasy teams out there that are desperate for some upside at the quarterback position, in which case, if you are one of those teams, I think making, you know, a 15%-ish, 20%-ish FAAB bid on Levis is justified because, man, you're not going to find quarterback upside off the waiver wire at this point. Your other options are probably, you know, Gardner Minshew, Kenny Pickett, Baker Mayfield. Like none of those guys are giving you upside. I think there's at least a chance Will Levis throwing 4 touchdowns in his NFL debut. Like that's an historically good NFL debut. There's at least a chance he gives you some upside. So I get it. If you're desperate at QB, I get spending up on Levis for the upside, but don't be shocked if the floor falls out from underneath you. We have to acknowledge that that's entirely possible as well.
couple other guys here on this first page I wanted to mention. Khalil Shakir had an awesome role. And, to me, like, I think the Bills should stick with playing this way. And what I mean by that is they didn't have Dawson Knox. They didn't have Quentin Morris, their other tight end. They didn't want to use their fourth tight end. And so basically they were just like, you know what? Let's just go to more 3 and 4 wide sets. That allowed Khalil Shakir to play a ton. And honestly, the offense was more efficient. So I don't think it's crazy to think that even when Knox gets back, they can stick to more 3 wide receiver sets. I always thought Shakir was better NFL player than Hardy or Sherfield or stuff like that. And it looks like, at least in the slot, the Bills agree. So I think Shakir is probably available in almost every league out there. And he would be, if people are going to give me him for free and it's a deeper league, I'd be willing to take a shot there. The other wide receiver I don't mind taking shots on, of course, is Rashid Shaheed. Nothing has changed on Rashid Shaheed, right? He made that big play against the Colts. It was an awesome matchup for him against the Colts. Most weeks, he's going to have a really low floor, but the ceiling is there. So I think you know what you're getting into with Shaheed. Shakir is the one, though, with the news change. Any thoughts on those two guys, Sam?
Yeah, I think you summed it up pretty well for Shakir. The only thing I'd add is that I think we have clarity now that if Diggs or if Gabe Davis were to get injured, Shakir is the guy that I would project into a larger role in Buffalo. So that also kind of adds an additional reason to pick him up. I think, it's rare that we kind of have wide receiver handcuffs in fantasy. And I'm obviously not saying Shakir is a 1-for-1 replacement for Stephon Diggs if he were to get injured, but I do think that contingent upside case is there for him as well. So I would have him ranked above Shaheed and Michael Wilson. Nothing to add on Shaheed. You summed it up well. Like, put him in your starting lineup. You might get 20 points. You might get 2 points. Like, that's just what's going to happen with Shaheed.
For sure. And you'll get 2 more often, but man, when he hits like he hit this past week, and when the entire week, running back is really bad on waiver wire this week. I would not go out of my way just to add someone for the sake of adding. We have some guys listed who are effectively contingent running backs. In other words, Rico Dowdle, Elijah Mitchell, Kenny Gainwell, Josh Kelly types. If their starter got hurt, they would be viable. And I think the guys that are one injury away are always worth rostering if you have space. The interesting guys like Zach Charbonnet got a way bigger role this past week. I assume he's owned. We didn't list him here because he's owned in more than 50%. But any running backs you wanted to highlight, or anyone else that you think in the Charbonnet line that check first that they're owned before you move on?
Yeah, I'd say like the check first guys before you get to this tier of the Dowdle, Mitchell, Gainwell, Kellys is Charbonnet, which you mentioned, Chuba Hubbard, who's I think still available allegedly in 50% of Yahoo and ESPN leagues. I don't know how many of these leagues are real, but he's allegedly available in 50%. Amari DeMarcado, I would probably add before these guys. He should be a decent spot starter for you next week. And Devin Singletary, I think, is the last one. Check for those 4 guys first. If they're not available, I do prefer Dowdle quickly amongst this tier of contingent upside guys, just because I think there's a chance that the Cowboys do some reflection and say, hey, maybe Pollard is not great in this workhorse role. Maybe it'd be better if we gave someone else more of the dirty work between the 20s. I'm certainly not projecting that by any means, but I think it's at least more possible that Rico Dowdle takes on a larger role than, say, Elijah Mitchell, steals touches from CMC, or, Josh Kelly steals touches from Austin Eckler. That's my take on these contingent guys, is that I slightly prefer Dowdle above other ones, but I think they're all in the same tier. It's not a huge difference.
I just talked a ton about Tony Pollard on the solo pod. You guys can go back and listen to this, but to Sam's point, I mean, I think the situation has been weird and fluky for Tony Pollard, but he also has not been very good. He is 4th from the bottom in rush yards over expectation. He's also 40th out of 59 qualifiers in PFF grades. Like, just hasn't been good on top of all the weird stuff that the Cowboys run. But go to the solo pod for more on Pollard if you're interested there. Move on to best of rest here for those of you watching on YouTube. Sam, anyone on this list here that you want to highlight?
Yeah, I think let's start maybe with the running backs. Royce Freeman, I think, is worth mentioning. He's in a 50-50 split, basically, with Darrell Henderson. I think his case takes a bit of a hit just because Stafford being banged up kind of lowers his floor and ceiling there. Another situation probably worth talking about. I know we might get to this in the questions as well, but Leonard Fournette signing with the Bills. I have Latavius Murray and Fournette sort of back to back here in these running back rankings. I'm seeing a lot of takes that, Fournette might be the Bills starter and all these things like that. I'm not really buying that. I think they basically are bringing him in to replace the Damian Harris role because Harris is probably unlikely to return with the neck injury. For contingent upside, I think Fournette is worth adding, but I'm probably lower than consensus on him. I'll stop there, Adam. Any thoughts on Fournette?
Yeah, we actually didn't get very many Fournette questions, or any, I don't think, which actually speaks to how the market views Leonard Fournette, and I think they're viewing it correctly. I mean, Leonard Fournette was on the street for literally the entire offseason and the entire season without a peep for a reason. He's just not it. He's just not. And I think the Bills know that. I think they prefer Latavius. I think they'll continue to prefer Latavius. I'm worried about Damian Harris's neck long term. That was a really scary injury. It sounds like the Bills likely are too, based on this move. I guess my one concern is that somewhere Fournette has played well is on pass downs. And if they think that Fournette is better than James Cook on pass downs, I am concerned that we could see James Cook lose a little bit of work there. But yeah, I don't think I'd be adding Leonard Fournette. Like I won't be trying to add Leonard Fournette really on any of my teams.
I agree there. And then maybe while we're still on running back, this is kind of maybe more for deeper leagues, but Michael Carter has sort of surpassed Dalvin Cook as a running back too in New York. Again, how much does that matter? I'm not sure. But if you're on these leagues where all these backup running backs are stashed, I think I'd prefer to own Michael Carter over Dalvin Cook at this point.
Okay. At wide receiver, who we haven't touched on, I think Mingo's role is rising a little bit. Not going to be excited about or go out of my way to add that. Even with Brandon Johnson on IR, they gave Marvin Mims 14 routes, which was roughly the same as Lil Jordan Humphrey. Obviously, we need a trade there. I don't think it's going to happen, but if there's a trade in the next 2 hours of Judy or Sutton, obviously Marvin Mims should be added. Jameson Williams played roughly the same amount as Khalif Raymond last night in that game. Just seems like they think he's super raw and they don't trust him. So it's not that exciting for these rest of targets at wide receiver either. I don't think. Anybody else you want to talk about at wide receiver or tight end?
No, nothing super interesting. I'll just add Zay Jones is available in a ton of leagues. And like when he's healthy, which I think Jaguars aren't by this week, they're back next week. You can maybe wait a week to add him. But I think he's just like a good depth piece to have on your roster, sort of in the wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 zone. When he's healthy, he'll have chances at big games with Trevor Lawrence at quarterback. But yeah, not when we're talking about Zay Jones, 15 minutes into a podcast, it's not a great waivers week.
We did get a question from Dave. He said, rest of season tight end, Myers or McBride. I'm not sure. I think he meant Mayer or McBride. Yeah. We have Mayer here second among the tight end ads this week. It's just a no-brainer, McBride over Mayer, given the state of the Raiders, given the state of their quarterback play, and McBride's role is better. I mean, we saw them run tight end screens to freaking Austin Hooper last night. I was about to throw my TV out the window. So, I think it's pretty clearly McBride over Mayer. I assume you agree there, Sam.
Yeah, and just quarterback, like, man, Jimmy G, I'll take an L. I think I underestimated how bad Jimmy G could play, and last night was ugly, and I don't know, who knows with Kyler, but I assume he's going to be better than Jimmy G at this point when he comes back. So definitely give me McBride there.
Okay, let's move to. Let's move to any drops you want to highlight for people. I mean, people want to drop, like, I get crazy questions all the time, like, should I drop T. Higgins and stuff like that? I don't think that stuff is realistic to talk about. There's some obvious ones that you could make. Dalvin Cook is an easy one to drop. McLaughlin, I think, with Javonte Williams' role expanding, is an easy one. I'd probably hold Rashad Penny through the trade deadline today, but if he doesn't get picked up, he's an easy drop. Any other notes on drops here?
No, I think you covered it pretty well. I'll say again, like, if you're owning any of these Kansas City wide receivers, I see Kadarius Toney, Sky Moore, MVS even having pretty high rostership in these ESPN Yahoo leagues. Like, say goodbye to these dudes. It's not happening. You can use your roster spot on Michael Carter over those guys.
Yep. All right. Deep leaguers. I mean, Chase Edmonds did start to play a little bit ahead of Keyshawn Vaughn. It's just I feel like their entire run game is broken. So I wouldn't be overly excited about that, but he probably should be rostered in deep leagues. Any other thoughts on deep league guys we haven't mentioned yet?
Yeah, it gets really disgusting pretty quick here. Daniel Bellinger, I guess if the Waller hamstring stuff is bad, we saw him flash a tiny bit last year down the stretch for the Giants. I think they do sort of on a relative basis like Daniel Bellinger. So you'd have to be so down bad to start a Giants tight end, I think. But he's worth mentioning. Then wide receiver, again, we're talking deep leagues, 20 roster spots. I guess Juju has a chance. Like they did pay him $20 million. I think he's completely done, but I think there's at least a chance they say, hey, Parker's banged up. Bourne's done for the year. Tyquan Thornton can't play. We got to at least try playing Juju in this slot role, and maybe he can become a PPR scam of sorts, but don't hold your breath in that one. I just think for, 20 roster spot leagues, he's worth mentioning with the Bourne injury.
Yep. Totally fair. And yeah, I like that we keep having Noah Gray on our list here. If something happened to Kelsey, I mean, Noah Gray can play. I mean, you can see when Noah Gray's out there, he can play a little bit for sure. All right.
Yep.
Before we wrap up here, let's get to some questions that you guys submitted on Twitter. We covered a bunch of the McBride ones. Let's try to finish the McBride ones here. Philip says, would you prioritize Jahan Dotson over McBride and Douglas if he's available on waivers? Thanks for the weekly content. You're welcome, Philip. So Jahan Dotson, I'm sure, was dropped in a ton of leagues, a ton of home leagues. Jahan Dotson was definitely dumped in. He steps up as Sam Howell throws the ball 50 plus times yet again. I really liked Jahan Dotson before the season. I really liked him. I was taking him a ton in like round 7 and 8. It's been painful so far. What do you think about Dotson versus McBride and Demario Douglas?
Yeah, so I would. The easy question first, I guess, Dotson over Douglas. I would prioritize Dotson over Douglas. I just think the environment has a lot more upside. Washington, even though Sam Howell has been very boom bust, probably more bad games than good games, Washington is still throwing at a really high rate. I think they're top 3, top 5 in the NFL in pass rate over expected. So there's at least a chance that if Howell improves, starts taking less sacks, this could be a fantasy friendly passing environment in Washington in a way that, I think there's much more upside there than in New England. I think Dotson versus McBride, that's a team needs question. Do you need a tight end? Are you starting Tyler Higbee and Tyler Conklin and you really need McBride? I would go McBride over Dotson. If you have Kelsey, Goddard, someone like that, I'd probably go Dotson.
Windsurfer says, a good waiver option for Cousins. Thanks. So I'm sure there's a lot of people listening to this that lost Kirk Cousins. It is very hard for us to answer these questions on what you should do at quarterback without knowing what is available. If there's not much available on your wire and you're in a normal 12-team league, there's likely people carrying 2 quarterbacks. I don't personally often carry 2 quarterbacks on leagues like that, but I know a lot of other people do, especially in home leagues. So the first thing I would do is go to people who are carrying 2 quarterbacks and try to swing some kind of trade for them. It should not be expensive to acquire somebody's second quarterback. If you are going to waivers and there's reasonable stuff on there, I don't think it's crazy to stream. I mean, this week, Derek Carr has a home game against the Bears. Like, you could definitely do worse. Bryce Young is home against the Colts, but without knowing what's out there, it's really hard for us to say. But any general thoughts on what people should be doing who have Kirk Cousins right now, Sim?
Yeah, we already talked about Levis being the top option for me off waivers this week. If you had Cousins, I think you mentioned a couple of good streamers, Carr. I'd maybe throw Minshew and Mayfield into that like okay streamers category along with Bryce Young. But yeah, I also know some people are like really desperate in super flex league. So these are some takes for like the really desperate super flex people who just need any quarterback to start this week. I think Clayton Tune has a chance of starting this week. So again, if you just like have quarterbacks on bye and just need someone to fill into that starting lineup spot, I think Clayton Tune in a super flex league might be available. Jaron Hall is another name that might get a start this week over Josh Dobbs in Minnesota. And then the final one worth mentioning would be, is it Brett Ripien, right? For the
Brett
Rams.
Ripien, yes. The son of Mark Ripien, yes.
Yeah, exactly. So again, these are super flex takes, but those are guys you can look to for spot starts off the waiver wire this week.
Yeah, I'm sure Daniel Jones got dropped also in most leagues. and he is coming back. I'm pretty sure he's coming back from his neck thing this week. Daniel Jones, I think Josh asked which QB streamer has the best chance of becoming a weekly set it and forget it starter. I'm not optimistic Daniel Jones will turn around, but he has the skill set, the rushing ability to become a weekly set it and forget it if he can get hot like he did at the end of last year again. Coach Brower says longer term stashes for the playoffs. Yeah, so we have added this to the article, Jack's weekly buys and sells article. He's going to be talking about stashes and stuff like that for the playoffs. It remains, to me at least, the injured guys and the rookies are obviously going to be the ones that I want to stash to see what happens as they come out of their buys, as the season moves along. Anybody come to mind for you, Sam, on longer term stashes for the playoffs?
Yeah. I think honestly we covered a lot of the top handcuffs in terms of running back so far. I think another one worth mentioning, Travion Williams in Cincinnati. If you're going to target a Cincinnati running back sort of stash, I think Travion would be the guy behind Mixon for me. Chase Brown moved to IR. Chris Evans isn't really playing. And then to answer the second part of this question, backup quarterbacks that may take over the starter's job. Not a ton jumps out to me there. Again, if you're in super flex leagues, like these deep super flex leagues, Nick Mullins is someone worth keeping on the radar. I think Josh Dobbs is going to have the first crack at things in Minnesota, but Mullins can be back from IR in week 10. And if Dobbs struggles, he could be the starter down the stretch for whatever that's worth. He's someone worth mentioning.
Yeah, we mentioned this one a little bit already, but not Ronnie McLean says, as a James Cook owner, how aggressive should we be on Leonard Fournette? Thin at running back, only has Bijan. Kyron Williams is on IR for him. So if you have James Cook, I mentioned that I was a little bit worried about the pass game role, Fournette cutting into that. Obviously, if Cook got injured, you expect Fournette to play more, although Latavius, I think, would play a lot also. But yeah, does it change your thinking on Fournette if you have James Cook here, Sam?
I think in this specific circumstance, this owner, he's thin at running back. He has James Cook. I get why you would prioritize Fournette a little bit more than the average team here, because if Cook goes down, yes, Fournette does have a chance to have some contingent upside. So again, we've talked about it. I don't think I'm high on Fournette. Adam, I don't think you're high on Fournette. I would maybe in this circumstance go max 10% of my FAAB. Like I'm letting other people grab Fournette for the most part, and don't think it's really going to come back to bite me.
A couple more here. Yater says, if I had to drop one, would it be JSN or Rashee Rice? I obviously don't want to be dropping either of these guys. Rashee Rice's role was, as expected, took a small step back with Justin Watson out there. Rashee Rice did still play a ton of snaps, but still, he's only going to run a route on like 60% of the dropbacks. At tops, like 70%. I don't think it's going to get above that. JSN, meanwhile, when Metcalf and Lockett are out there, it's been hard for him to crack a 15+% target share. So if you had to drop one here, Sam, would it be JSN or Rashee Rice?
Yeah, like you said, I don't want to drop either necessarily, but I think I would drop JSN. Just comparing the two, I think Rice plays with a better quarterback. I think Rice has the better path to an increased role without an injury. I really just don't think JSN is like close to as good of an NFL player versus man coverage as DK Metcalf or Tyler Lockett are right now. So I just don't see him having really any chance of overtaking those guys without an injury. Rice obviously has the KC wide receiver rotation problem himself, but I can at least see him getting to 80%, 70% routes without an injury. And then just, target earning ability. I just think what Rice has shown so far in the NFL, he's been targeted on nearly 30% of his routes versus 20% for JSN. Sort of similar ADOTs and similar parts of their profile after that. But I'd prefer Rice to JSN at this point. But like you said, hopefully there's someone else you can drop here.
Yep. Agreed with all that. Last question we're going to do here today comes from Rob. He says, should I drop? He's in a bye week gauntlet. Should I drop Dameon Pierce or Brian Robinson? So one thing on Brian Robinson from this past week, Chris Rodriguez played 0 offensive snaps. And I was real worried that Chris Rodriguez was gaining on Brian Robinson. That seemed to go out the window this past week against the Eagles. Meanwhile, Pierce continues to see pressure from Devin Singletary. This is a tough one. Sam, who would you drop, Dameon Pierce or Brian Robinson?
Yeah, that is tough. I think I would drop Pierce in this situation. It may be recency bias, but yeah, you look at last week, it seems like they phased out Chris Rodriguez in Washington, whereas in Houston, they're now doing this really messy, like 3-man backfield with Mike Boone also in the mix for the Texans. So I think both these guys are sort of TD dependent RB3s, maybe low end RB2s at this point, but I think Robinson just has a slightly better chance of consolidating the rush attempts on his own team as compared to Dameon Pierce. So I would probably drop Pierce and keep Robinson.
Okay. I'm fine with that. I'm glad you had an answer for that because I really didn't know. So, yes, I'm fine with that. All right. That is going to do it for this week 8 waiver wire edition. For a full breakdown of every waiver wire player, thoughts on them, bid recommendations, check out Sam's article on establishthерun.com right now. For Sam, for all the producers behind the scenes, for Jerry, the most beautiful beast in the world, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.